How's it going, everyone? John here, the host of Spear Talk. You might not know this, but before I record an episode, I like to break a sweat. And I do that using the Chop Fit. Over the course of the past year, the Chop Fit has allowed me to lose weight, tone up my body, and feel even more amazing about myself. A feeling that you should all feel about yourselves as well. If you use this code, SpearChop10, you get $10 off your order. Once again, use code SpearChop10 for $10 off your Chop Fit order. It'll change your life. Thank you. How's it going, everyone? John here, the host of Spirit Talk, and today we are welcoming Mr. Brent Sass to the program. Brent is a competitive dog musher and a wilderness guide. He's also the owner-operator of Wild and Free Mushing, and his team and his dogs and himself have won the Yukon Quest in 2015, 2019, and 2020. Brent, it is awesome to have you on here.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate having me.
And so when people watch the show, they're always kind of wonder why I have certain guests on here. And obviously, I've had anyone from law enforcement to martial arts to actors to authors, motivational speakers, fitness people. And they're going to be like, well, why do you have Brent on here? Like, yes, it's super fascinating. There's not a lot of people in the world that do this, or even just the survival aspect of it. And I go, well, growing up, when I was a kid in first and second grade, I had this teacher, Mrs. Stacy, who she made us pick a state to learn about it. So I chose Alaska, and I went down this rabbit hole. This is back when PBS and stuff was actually really cool with informational programs, and I learned about the Iditarod, Alaska, and all this stuff. And I've always just kept been fascinated growing up. And then as you get older, I start reading Jack London books, learning about these men and people who live in the wilderness with their dogs, and Iron Will, White Fang, all this stuff about humans and their dogs and this crazy stuff they do. And I've always loved it. I've always wished I could go watch the Iditarod like you can do a NASCAR race or something like that. And so I reached out to you, just doing some research about everything. And again, Brent, it's glad to have you on here.
Yeah, well, appreciate it. I can really shed a little light on that lifestyle for you.
And so I know you weren't born in Alaska, but you ended up going out there for skiing and then at the sports for that type of stuff. But what was the actual thing that you saw? Was it a musher in action, a bunch of dogs? And how did you kind of make that parlay into the what you do now?
Well, the dream of going to Alaska was born when I was like 5 years old. Literally, I was visiting my grandma, and they had just got back from a cruise from Alaska, and I, didn't have any idea what Alaska was or anything like that. And I just saw pictures of mountains and rivers, and I told my parents right there and then that I was going to move to Alaska and live in a cabin in the woods. And so that dream never died, and all the way till when I was 18, and I decided that I was going to apply to one school when I was going to leave home, and it was going to be UAF, and that was going to be my ticket to Alaska. I didn't have any plans past that. It was like, if I can get into UAF, then my parents can't stop me from going to Alaska, and that's what I did. And I was a skier, and I skied on the ski team, and literally I was in Alaska for a couple of years, skiing on the ski team and going to school, and just kind of starting my Alaska life. And one day a dog team came by at my feet, and I was out skiing on the trails, and this dog team came by, and I was like, a light bulb went off in my head. I had been watching the sport a little bit. I had been exposed to it a little bit. I went to a start of a quest. This was a couple of years into my stay in Alaska, but I never really got the feeling I got when that team came right by me on the trail. And I just said, I want to do that. And from that day forth, I started, I kind of chased that musher down and decided I wanted to have him. And I went and talked to him a couple days later, and he was like, I was like, I want to be a musher. I was just young, 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid. And this guy looked at me kind of funny, and he was this bushy, older Alaskan guy, kind of a typical Alaska looking guy. And he said, come back in a week. And I came back in a week, and he handed me a puppy, and he said, here's your first puppy. You're a dog musher now. and that's how it all began. And that I named that dog Silver, and he is to this day still a large part of, he passed away. He was 18 2 years ago. He passed away, but he's sort of the basis of the whole thing. And that's where it all started.
I've had the privilege when I'm out there with clients and stuff that we have a day off before a show or something, usually at the Alaska State Fair. And last time I was there, we went, a bunch of us went to the Byron Glacier, and we love the landscape. And you said it best. It's gorgeous. The water, the mountains, the snow, everything about it. But then you're kind of like, if you're not prepared, like we had a group of 8 people, like you could get killed, whether it's a bear, fall down a rock, get crushed by ice. And it has this aesthetic where you're like, it's so pretty here, but it's very dangerous. And so for you, obviously with the skiing and stuff, you had to have some sort of background, like make a tourniquet or a shunt or a split and stuff like that. But as you jump into the mushing, were you also getting ready to kind of start learning and getting how you can adapt to different situations on the trail when you're by yourself and your dogs?
Yeah, I mean that's everything in the end is the adaptability of you and your dogs and your ability to adjust to the changing environment around you, you know. And that's the thing that keeps me going with it keeps the lighter fit the light lit as far as like just wanting to get out and do and experience everything. That's what Alaska really allows you to do is get out and every day I face a new challenge. Every day there's something that I don't know how to accomplish or I get faced with and I just have to do it. In those early years, yeah, I was soaking up everything. Out on the trail, I was learning different things. I was putting myself in situations that I never thought I would ever be in and learning how to get myself out of them, you know. And then, you know, making the move and not only getting involved with the mushing and I did that in town for several years and got dogs, and you're mushing in a town situation, you know, so you're never that far from civilization. And then 12 years ago or 10 years ago, I moved out to this homestead where I was 150 miles from town, and all of a sudden all of your safeguards went away. There is no backup to anything, you know. Like I carry a inReach, a satellite texting device, and that's my connection world. If something happens to me, if that thing happens to be right there, I can send a text. If not, it's completely up to me to get myself out of that situation. And that's the type of thing I thrive on. And I think that's a good musher throughout the years.
Now, as you get handed silver, and so the guy says this is the start of your mushing career, but what's the next step from that? Like, obviously, you have to build out the team, right? Or kind of talk me through the process of you getting to having silver and respect you and vice versa, because that partnership has to extend to all the other dogs as well. And so it's important for you to establish the relationship with silver before you move forward.
That's very true. You know, the relationship that we build with these dogs is everything. And when I first started, like I got Silver, he was my first dog. And then I just like collected a bunch of free dogs out of the newspaper to sort of add to that team. And he was still young. And I just was so anxious to get into the sport that I started with the most hodgepodge group of, you know, free dogs out of the paper. And they're going in every single different direction and they don't have any training and I don't have any training and everyone's just kind of going in circles. And those first couple of years, it's just a crash course. You know, you're learning how dogs operate. And during that time, I was bonding and raising Silver. And I realized right then and there that the bond that you create from a puppy and then you raise them together, that is what gets you down the trail. That is the ultimate thing. The loyalty and the trust between you and the dogs is what really is important. And I got that instilled in me with Silver. And right then I realized that I just wanted to sort of create a dog that was just like Silver that I could go out and do all these adventures with. And so then I started a breeding program because I was just in love with how basically everything about Silver was, I just loved it, you know. And what these people are doing in the sport is you're grabbing the genetics you like and you're creating the dog that you want to have in your team. And it's a long story. And then I just started breeding dogs and realizing what I wanted in a dog and realizing that from training them from puppies was going to give me the best opportunity to be the most successful at it. And then I built up a team over the years of almost all dogs that were out of Silver. My entire kennel now today, you know, 17 years later, 18 years later, is all based off of Silver. All the dogs are connected to him and related to him in some way, shape, or form, whether he's their great grandpa or just the dad. I still have some of his sons around. And so that whole thing runs through the genetics and through the bloodline. And it's that bonding connection that really got us to where we are today. And it's just been 20 years of doing that.
Now, when it comes to the breeding, it sounds, correct me if I'm wrong, very similar to maybe horse racing, where the owner will try and create the bloodline for the to be at the top horse, right? So, do you ever have to deal with, or not you specifically, but say people that compete that did around a Yukon Quest, where PETA or animal activist groups will reach out and be like, "Oh, you can't do this to the dogs" and stuff like that. Like, how do you kind of work around that? Because obviously, with wild and free bushing, like you take pride and respect and all this stuff, but are there other people out there that just kind of, you know, what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, yeah, there are people who don't understand, and all it is they don't understand, like, and that's why it's one of the reasons that I'm free mushing on the social media and on Instagram and Facebook, is that I want to spread the word that we're just allowing these dogs to do what they were born to do. They were born to run, they were born to work, they were born to do this mushing lifestyle. And so we're just allowing them to do that. And all the posts I do, all this stuff is organic, it all is real. The dogs live a very, very happy life. They are doing exactly what they want to do. And anyone who opposes that, or gives me a hard time, I just ask them to watch, to look, to follow the social media, come visit. You're going to see that these dogs are the happiest dogs on the face of the planet, and they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing.
Now, I've seen you post on your social media, like they have these little booty type things for conditions like that. I'm assuming because it's really cold or whatever the conditions are. Obviously, you know what you're doing, but what else is done for the dogs? Like when after the middle of a race, you take your break, whatever. How do they get blankets? Like, how do you kind of protect them in that sense?
Yep. So dog care is the number one during the race. If you're not taking care of your dogs, you're not making it 1,000 miles. There's no doubt about that. And I'm going to put about 3,500 miles to 4,000 miles on the dogs in training leading up to the race. So we're very prepared for the conditions, for everything the race is going to throw at us. And then, like you say, on top of that, we have all this gear and equipment. The technologies have improved over the years to sport, because we found out that the nutrition and the care of the dogs is what is going to make us the most successful and what's going to be the best for both the dogs and the humans. And so, yeah, the dog booties play a huge role. We put those on because, imagine running 1,000 miles with your bare feet. It's not going to happen. So, it's super important to protect their feet with the booties. But they also wear, like last night I was on a run, they wear these light running jackets. So when the wind's blowing really hard, they have the best fur ever, and they could sustain all of these weather conditions without the help of us. But we're trying to take these dogs to the ultimate high. We're trying to travel 1,000 miles in under 8 days or under 9 days. And so we want to help them in every way to keep those calories, to hold all of that energy, so they're not just burning it all up and getting depleted. So they wear jackets when they're running. They wear heavy insulated jackets when they rest. They lay on straw, and we feed them, in their food and their diet is really everything. We feed them the best quality foods they could possibly have. They burn about 10,000 calories a day on the trail, and we have to constantly replenish that. So we're feeding them the highest quality beef fat, the highest quality beef, the highest quality kibbles you can that are designed for these long distance races, so that we can replenish that energy and keep the dogs at their highest athletic ability throughout the entire race.
Just awesome. So one of our listeners that follows the show, Kim, was wondering, on a day off, or when say you have a weekend off, or God forbid, I don't know what your schedule is, but what do the dogs do? Like, what's their kind of downtime, leisure time? Are they always wanting to work? Like, how do you kind of break that up for them to actually make it so that type of thing?
Yeah. I mean, morale is everything, and so that's what my job as the coach of the team, as the manager of the team, is to know when they need the days off, when they need to be pushed a little harder, so that as we prepare for the races, I understand what these dogs need. And that's one of the best parts about the genetics, is like, because I've had generations of this same genetics, I understand the dogs so well, and that genetics carries throughout generations. And so, for me, I run a different schedule kind of every year. I'm always constantly adjusting and changing the way that I train them. But right now it's a 5 days on, 2 days off schedule for the dogs. I'm training 26 dogs, so that means that I have no days off. I'm basically running all the time, every day. Most of the days I'm doing 2 runs a day right now. So I spend upwards of 12 to 17, 18 hours a day on the back of a dog sled. But the key thing is in the time off is that we're having a good time, loose. Everyone likes to be loose. Everyone likes to be free. And so on our days off, a lot of times it's just loose hiking and free running. They get to run around, burst their energy out, not be in the line, not be necessarily working, just be having a good time. And that's the key thing. Morale is everything. And time in the cabin, I'll bring all 26 of my dogs into my little cabin and we'll hang out in there and they'll spread out. So I'll spread out. Their pros at getting in and just finding their spot on the floor. And I can have 26 in a small 12 by 18 cabin, just hanging out, So on their days off, it's not even really days off. We're working on all kinds of things. On those days, I'm going through their body, giving them full body massages, looking at their feet, going through their feet, rubbing. We have ointments that we put in their feet to improve healing and to prevent any sores or blisters. They can get like what the equivalent in our feet are blisters. And so we're constantly doing the care needed to maintain that stuff. So the dogs are in the best possible ability they could be for the race.
Now, when it comes to you, if you're having a bad day mentally, or there's an issue at home, or there's something happened, that's the dogs, obviously, with that respect and relationship with you, can tell when you're having an off day. So, what do you do to help assure the dogs that it's gonna be okay? Because they probably, I'm assuming, they know when you're on, right? Like they know when if you're the normal Brent. So,
totally, yeah, no, I mean that's one of the best parts about this is that the dogs keep you in check. For me, if I'm having a down day, all I think about, I think about the dogs. And I know that if I continue to have these, negative thoughts or get upset or get overwhelmed, that it's only feeding into all the dogs. And for me, that is like a slap in the face. Wake up. There's no reason to be negative. There's no reason to be down. Find the positive, move forward. Attitude is everything. And that's what I have 50 beans every day sort of reminding me of that. And so for me, it helps, I would say helps my mental health. I have these checks and balances that if I start to get a little bit upset about something, I have these checks and all these dogs that look at me and give me this like, hey man, we're living the dream here. Just keep focused, get your stuff together. And so it's a constant reminder that dogs are almost always in a good mood. So I try and feed off of that energy.
It's crazy too, because before I even jumped on it, I'm like, man, the idea of isolation where you're alone, but you have 20, 30 other people there with you, probably who are obviously, I think I love dogs more than humans, so I have that with you. But so it is something really interesting. The idea of you're not really alone, and it's super fascinating because if you or I living in a cabin somewhere 150 miles from civilization, you're going to be alone. Now, whether you're a writer, you like the isolation, you like the free thinking space, but it would be kind of daunting for someone that wants to jump into this life like you have, where you have to put all this time in and realize that this is what your life is going to be.
Totally. And like sometimes I'll even pinch myself. You're the first person I've talked to in about 2 weeks, face to face. So like, I talk to dogs and talk to myself all day long, every day. And that's just part of my life. And like you say, you're never alone. People always ask me, how do you live in this remote situation, way out in the middle of nowhere with no people? And usually have some help around, but right now I'm out here alone. And for me, like you say, I never feel alone. I've got dogs, and I've got 9 loose retired dogs that are just always around. They're always laying on the couch. They're always there when I'm sitting there. And like if I'm sitting there and I'm feeling overwhelmed about something, guess what? All of a sudden I've got 2 or 3 or 4 dogs that come over and stick their face in my face and lick and paw at me. And it's like, okay, refocus and get back to the task at hand. And so I think that is really how I really survive out here is the help from them as well.
And so I used to run cross country, and I love the idea. Once I would get so motivated to pass the next person in front of me, like I'm always chasing to be number one or whatever. But for you, obviously, when you're passing someone on a trail, or you do this crazy thing where it's like, oh man, I just made up time. Do your dogs, when they see you passing another team, are they aware that what's going on, in the sense that they know they're ahead? Like how do they put the competition goggles on, per se, when it comes to, this isn't just me and us and Brent out here on the trail practicing?
Right. Well, one, they feel what I feel.
Oh,
So if I'm really anxious and excited and like, yeah, let's go get these guys right now, we can do it. They're anxious and excited and fired up, and so all of the energy that I'm creating during that race is thrown at them. And the same way, the other way, like it can work the other way where I'm on the race. If I'm getting kind of tired and having a hard time and slap myself in the face because I haven't slept in 3 days and I can't keep awake. And at the same token, the dogs might just get a burst of energy, give me that extra burst of energy, like, oh man, these guys are right now, I got to get myself woken up and get back in the game. So we're constantly doing that throughout the race. But as far as the competition thing goes, they know, especially the veterans, they understand completely that we're in a race, that we're all against these guys, and they see that dog team, and it's like seeing a squirrel when we're out here all alone. If we're out here all alone, we see a squirrel and I'm going from 8 miles an hour to 15 miles an hour like that, and it's just like that in a race. If we're coming up on another competitor, I got butterflies. I'm like, yeah, we're going to pass this guy, and they get the same feeling and they start charging hard, and we fly by that team. And then I try and keep that energy moving. So we just keep plowing ahead. So, it is just about that. It's the feels, man. It's all about the energy between you and the dog team out there. And the better that energy, the better you're going to do in the race.
One of our listeners, Mary, was wondering, in the event of an actual race, if say a dog gets injured, whether it's a paw or you obviously something where it's not fit, you can't compete with that dog still. What is the policy procedure in place, or kind of like what do you carry with you out there that kind of help alleviate the dogs if there is an injury per se?
Yep. So this is a really good question. A really good big part of long distance racing is, so really the big thing is dog care is everything. Once a dog is injured, once a dog is hurt in any way, we do not continue with them. Sometimes you can massage. We use massage techniques. So a dog might get a knot in its shoulder, and in that case, I might stop. I might see the dog, limping a little bit or a little bit off. That's another thing, is that I'm watching these dogs for thousands of miles. So I key in on every little tiny thing that goes wrong with the dogs or is different in their gait. And so I'm trying to prevent everything from getting worse. So if I see something small, I'll stop immediately, walk up, test their feet. Is there a problem in their foot? Test their wrist, test their shoulder. And then if there's let's just say I find a knot in the shoulder, then I'll sit there and massage that knot out, just like we get knots in our shoulder and you can massage it out and it feels better. We do the same thing on the trail for the dogs out there. Now, if you get to the point where the dog is just, it's got a severe shoulder injury or it's got a severe wrist injury, it gets dropped along the way. There's checkpoints along the way in the race. And when you come into the checkpoint, if a dog is injured or sick, you drop it off and it gets taken over to care of veterinarians. There's veterinarians at each one of the checkpoints along the way in the race. And then in the Yukon Quest, you have a handler that's following you the whole way. And that dog goes directly to your handler, gets dropped from the race, and you continue on with less dogs. In the Yukon Quest and Iditarod, we start with 14. And you have to finish with a minimum of 6 in your team.
Wow.
And you can drop that many dogs, but you can't go below 6. And clearly the goal is to finish with as many dogs as you possibly can. But we never want to push them farther or harder they can go. Dog care and their well-being is everything. And so, a person who takes good care of their dogs has the good training before the race. I finished with almost all my dogs. I finished with 12 to 14 dogs almost all my races. And it's something I take pride in. It's just because we've done a good job of preparing for the race. And then over the years, you learn all the tricks and trades of keeping the dogs in good health throughout the race.
Now, when you won the Yukon Quest in 2019 and obviously in 2020, before the 2020 race, in your head mentally, was it more difficult for you to chase being the champion or more difficult to maintain winning it again? Because I can only imagine it's rare for teams to be that successful, that as steady as you are.
Yeah. For me, the biggest thing you can do in all this sport is not care about your competition. That's easier said than done. I totally understand that. But in the end, there's so many variables that if you go into the race thinking you're going to chase this guy or you're going to be chasing that guy or that guy's going to be chasing you, you're not going to have a very successful race. In this dog racing thing, we come to the race and you kind of got your blinders on to all your competition for the first 500 miles of the race. Because what you're doing for the first 500 miles of the race is just setting yourself up to race for the second half of the race. Or even some people will say the race even starts 750 miles in. If you can maintain your dogs, maintain your mental health, maintain the dog's mental health to the point where you can get to the race, which is 500 to 700 miles into the race, then you're set to go. Because then all that muscle memory, all the dogs, they're so well trained that if you can get them through those first 500 miles of the race in good condition, then you're ready to rock and roll. So for me, you know, in the end, I'm totally just zero focused on 100% focused on me and my race and my dogs, and trying not to let the clutter of everything else get in there until you get right down to the nitty gritty of that last few hundred miles.
I've had Lieutenant John Doors on this program a bunch, and he's a former law enforcement, but wild game warden. But he competes in the Baja 500, 1,000 stuff in Mexico, where we talked about some of the stuff we're talking about now, where it's the mental, the physical, whatever. But one of the coolest things, and I kind of get the sense from you, is that if you're in the middle of a race and you see someone get hurt or another dog have issues, another sled or musher in trouble, your first instinct is to help that person, or at least do what you can. And I think that's something that a lot of people in this day and age kind of, yeah, it'd be great to win first place, crush the competition, but would you feel good about yourself if you passed someone who was in genuine trouble or in a bad situation? Like for you, how important is that for you to actually help someone that might need help in a life or death situation?
It's huge. And it's one of the things that sets, I think, dog mushing and the sport of dog mushing apart from some of the other competitive sports that are very similar to it, is we're out there together. It's a survival aspect, you know? And so, and I will say my first, you know, before I became a competitive musher, my first 5 to 10 years of racing was totally around that whole survival thing. My reputation was that the harder the weather, the harder the conditions, the better my team is going to do. And so we found ourselves in a lot of those rescuing and safety type situations where Silver was known for saving people on the trail. We've come across a lot of people that were in peril back in the days before we were running in the front of the pack. And when you're faced with those situations, you don't even think twice. Your race is secondary to helping these people in these harsh conditions. I mean, I have been in life and death situations during races with other competitors when we have worked together to get through a certain situation, to get over a mountain that, you know, there's a bad storm on the mountain, and you know, you come across somebody who's just been bunkered down for hours and hours and hours because they can't go forward, and then you kind of work together to get yourselves out of that situation. And to me, that's the basis. That's one of the reasons I loved the sport from the beginning. That camaraderie that you have with these ultimate competitors. You know, we train all season long to beat everybody else around us, but when push comes to shove out there on the trail, every one of us are going to help each other get down the trail and through the peril. I think it's something that's very unique in mushing.
I'm always curious, and I wish there was more shows out there that when you guys are like all the competitors are in like the little hut on a break or whatever, and just sit by a wood stove. Like it just seems like it reminds me of like my grandfather growing up as a kid with all the other Italians in the street. They were playing bocce or something, where just the war stories that you talk about. But it's kind of cool that you all feel that way, where yeah, you're competitors, but end of the day, we can still talk shop and look out for one another. I think that again, that's something that's missing in a lot of sports today.
Yeah, there's no doubt that sitting in those cabins in remote places and everyone hasn't slept in 3 or 4 days, you know, and you're sitting next to your buddy, right? But you're also wondering, what's he gonna do next? What's his next move? How is his dogs looking? But you're like, hey man, having a good race, everybody's going good, dog's looking good, you know. In the back of your head, you're like, where's the chink in his armor, you know? But you're friendly the whole time, but you're also always trying to gain that extra edge, you know? And so there's some really fun dynamic about that, especially we all have to find the humor in it, because like I said, we haven't slept. A lot of times we haven't slept in days when we're out there interacting with each other. And so you're kind of playing the best friend / enemy competitor all at the same time. And so the mental games are also very, very fun.
And I think that's amazing too, because obviously the physicality of it. But I was watching this famous clip, this two guys back in the day that I did around, where they were always going back and forth with each other in 1, 2, 3, whatever that, and they they would basically talk to each other all night. Whoever fell asleep first, the other person would head back out. And it's just like the weird, crazy mind games where it's like, it is kind of mind blowing that so after a race, how much time do you take between kind of resetting yourself? Because you would be tired physically, mentally, your dogs.
Yeah.
Like, is there ever a downtime for you?
I mean, a little bit. Like, I mean, it depends. Like every year, for a lot of years, I ran both the 1,000-mile Quest and the iditarod, and there was generally about 2 weeks between those races. The dogs are ready to go in about 3 or 4 days. The human needs a little bit more time to sort of reset and reboot. But your body is like, I get about 4 hours of sleep a day all the time. Like that is kind of where my body can function. And so that really lends well to the racing scenario, because basically you're going 10 hours on, 4 hours off, 10 hours on, 4 hours off. It's kind of a rough schedule that I take out there. And so it's one of those things where you're just constantly keeping yourself motivated to go. And the bottom line is, this is my passion. I love to do this. And everyone asks, where do you find the energy to do this? Where do you find it's just there? Like I go to bed at, like last night I went to bed I got done with a run, got done, fed all the dogs, got done at about 2:00 in the morning, and I get to bed and I'm already like, oh, I got to wait 3 hours before I can get back up and feed the dogs and get ready to get back out there. Like that's just the mentality in my brain. It's like, I just love to do this so much that I'm able to just find that extra energy. And then my lifestyle really lends into what it takes to be able to survive the sleep deprivation.
Now, obviously, I'm familiar with Iditarod. I think people are, especially if they follow people like yourself. But are you able to get sponsors for yourself, your team, and stuff like, or is this something where, like, what's it going to take for this to become mainstream? Like, why isn't this on ESPN2 at the very least over
Right.
ballroom dancing or cornhole during the pandemic? Because I think I could have enjoyed a musher and his dogs more than watching people throw sandbags around.
Totally. I think that I hope that we get there. I think that's the goal behind mushing in these organizations with the Yukon Quest and Iditarod, is to get more people involved and get it more mainstream. I think that because of the dogs and the like you said earlier, the opposition, that people are just totally ignorant to the fact
Right.
that we're doing exactly what we love and what these dogs love to do. We got to kind of break through that barrier. We're always going to have the PETA people breathing down our backs. But the bottom line is, they come to these races and they can have their little picket lines and whatever, but like, you can't argue with the show. The show is there. The dogs love what they're doing. It's very clear. There's no arguing that. So I think we're getting there. I think that the more mushers do that, what I'm doing, we get the outreach, we get people involved in our lives, we get people to see that we are really doing for these dogs what they deserve and what they love. So I hope that we continue to build it. We've had a few kind of rough years here because PETA is going after the races and going after the financial side of the sport. And so they're kind of having to pivot a little bit and go away from big corporate sponsors and go more grassroots, just because the corporate people can't touch it because they're getting slapped in the face by PETA for doing anything with us. So, but on the same token, so many people have seen the light and understand, what we're doing, and that we're promoting an amazing sport and something that these dogs love, that I feel like we're social, more social media gets into it, the more the sport will hopefully grow. And I'm doing 6 races this season, so I have a huge schedule ahead of me. I'm going to be racing basically nonstop all of January, February, and into March. And so it's go for me from here on out.
Now, obviously, your attitude, when you go and talk to people, motivational speaking and stuff, and people, everything you're saying now, yes, it pertains to mushing in your sport. But if you look at the bigger picture, this pertains to, I don't care what job you have. You could be a chef, a teacher, a single parent, a cop, whoever you are. This mindset of being super positive. And so when your grandfather told you never give up, you took that to heart. And so is it disheartening for you though when you see people you talk in front of, they're like, they don't get that or don't see that what you saw? because we all have this unlimited potential. And for me, I get upset when people don't use that potential, where you just kind of sit back and go, man, you got everything right now. You got everything and
Yeah.
you're not doing anything about it. So how does that kind of mess with you a little bit when you talk to people and just don't get that idea?
Yeah, I think that well, I try and be like I am right now. I am exuding positivity at all times, and to be honest with you, I have very rarely has anyone ever gotten in my face after I've done a talk or I've talked about this, because it's hard to argue with the fact that we're doing what these dogs love and I'm doing what I love, and I have, keep a positive attitude is it's an understatement. Like you say, this is life lessons. All the things that I'm doing, it's just I'm just putting it into the Alaska wilderness. This can be put into any kind of lifestyle, any kind of sport, any kind of job anywhere out there. And so I guess the naysayers, I just don't even listen. I mean, I do what they say. I try and I don't even argue. All I do is preach what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I have 100% confidence what I'm doing is the best possible thing for these dogs and the best possible life they could possibly be living. And as long as I know that, then everything I do is for them. I mean, I'm 42 years old and my entire life is devoted to sled dogs. I literally live a life that I don't think about anything else all day long except for sled dogs. And I'm feel very, very fortunate about that. So in the end, like I'm so confident in what I'm doing that I don't let any of that get in my way.
And obviously, my job with security and protecting people, I'm willing to die for my job because I love it. I live and breathe it. But when I talk to you, I mean, obviously, we both have to sacrifice stuff. But I could go to the new movie theater and check out a new movie, or I could go somewhere and get that food that I need, or go to Target and grab something I want just for selfish reasons. You can't
Yeah.
do that, and so as someone that always finds motivation to others, I can look at you and be like, well, maybe I'm not sacrificing enough in what I believe in or want to do. Is that a fair thing to think? Because obviously our careers are much different, but like we
Right.
said before, if you really believe and want to accomplish something in your limited time on earth, you have to be willing to sacrifice a lot of stuff for it. So I'm kind of looking at you going, man, maybe I could stay up an extra hour later or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that I can get to people like that. I know that I can confidently say that I'm living the dream. It's cliche as can be, but the
Yep.
bottom line is that I'm doing what I want to do every single day. And I don't want anyone to gauge what the effort that I'm putting in against the effort that they're putting into their life or their goals or their aspirations. But all I can say is that I give 100% to my lifestyle, to my life, to my dogs, to my goals and dreams every single day. And I've created a life here that I love thoroughly, that takes every bit of my energy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There is no day off. There is no bored. There is no I never go to bed thinking, what am I going to do tomorrow? Or even wake up, what am I going to do today? Like my to-do list is 3,000 things long. But the thing is that I've created all of that. I've made this life for myself. And so even when I get bogged down or I get, overwhelmed with everything going on, I just have to sit back and go, look where I'm at. Look what I'm doing. There is nothing right now that should be slowing me down. Just keep plugging along. And so I think everybody should just take it all with a grain of salt and just give everything you've got to what you've got going on and what your passions are. Once you find that passion, I don't think it's that hard. Like you say, you found it with yourself. It's not, you're willing to die for what you're doing. And same thing for me. It's just one of those things. We're fortunate people in that we found our passions. And all I can say is that people just find your passions. Like I think that is what drives me every day and makes it so that I don't even have to think twice about the effort and all the energy I put into this lifestyle.
Right. So if people obviously they go to your Wild and Free Mushing website about information, about more about information about yourself, the dogs, racing. But if people that listen to this podcast episode are going to be like, I want to learn more about this. It's not biased, but where can someone go that just be like, I want to learn about the history, this type of stuff? Like, what resources out there would you recommend people go check out about the Yukon Quest, the iditarod, or just Mushing in general?
Yep. Well, both the Iditarod and the Yukon Quest websites are full of good information. Iditarod has an insider program where they do a lot of, they'll go out and video, make videos of mushers throughout the season. So you get a little behind the scenes look at other kennels, because that's what it's all about. It's about the diversity, the people like myself and all the different diverse people, mushers of all different walks of life. I mean, there's people that are 18-year-old just out of high school that are doing this and want to create a life out of this. And there's 75-year-old old guys that are still doing it. And there's everything in between. And so learning the mushers and understanding what drives them and learning their kennels, I think, is what will get people the most connection to the sport. So go to the websites, be able to hook into the other websites like mine, my wildandfreealaska.com website. Almost all the mushers have websites. So I would get on and look for their personal websites, because that's going to give you the insight to what you're watching and what you're looking at. Because the more you know the characters, I mean, it's like why everyone likes basketball players. They like the players. They get in touch with the players. They get connected to certain players. With mushing, you can do that same thing. You can get connected to different mushers that you feel like you're like, or you aspire to be like, or you just like certain, you know, some people, there's a lot of mushers that live in the city and mush dogs in the city and go and compete in these races. And then there's a lot of mushers like me who live in the middle of nowhere. So we're all characters. And I think getting to know the characters that are playing in this is what's going to get you the most involved in the sport. So checking out people's websites, I think is your, and going to the what Yukon Quest and Iditarod websites is where you'll find that.
I love it. So you mentioned you got 6 races coming up in 2022. How far out do you kind of plan or decide like what you're going to do?
Well, I started my planning, you know, after the last race last year, but this summer I decided last year, because the last 2 years have been really weird with COVID and stuff. We had some of the races were canceled, and we've had sort of modified races. We still have a modified quest. We're still not crossing the border during the race. And so basically I look at where the races are in August and September, and I sort of make my game plan of what races are going to happen. And this year I'm training 26 dogs for my main race team. And so it's a lot of dogs. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm racing one team one weekend, and then I'm going to come home and I swap the team, and then I race the next weekend with the other team, and I come home and I swap the team. So I'm going to race every dog in my team in 2 to 3 races. And then that'll basically allow me to figure out what the best dogs are, not only individually, but as a team. And then I can take the top 14 dogs in my kennel to the Iditarod in March. That's kind of the ultimate goal. Is these other races are more, they're competitive races. I'm trying to win every race that I enter, but these other ones are more of a build up, sort of sorting out the dog team, figuring out what veterans are still got the juice to do it, figuring out what young ones are going to rise to the challenge and join the team, and then meshing that together to create the best team that I can for Iditarod. So the plan, you know, is evolving at all times. Like right now, I'm just in training miles. We're putting on, you know, 300-400 miles a week right now or more. And I'm just learning how the team meshes together. I've got a bunch of young dogs that I'm bringing into the team. And so it's just, I'm just a coach, and it's so much fun to arrange and figure out the best combination so that we take the best team to the race.
Is your gear or like sled material, is that stuff ever changing? Like when someone releases a new product, do you get to try it out, or are you just so set in your ways of what you have? Like, why would you change something up?
Always evolving. The sport has been changing and evolving since it started. Innovators have been along the way. The sleds, the gear, the technology has all changed. It's still changing. Everybody, like, I'm trying new things every year, different types of connections with the lines to streamline things. Snaps freeze, you know, the snaps that we hook the dogs to the line, snaps freeze. So I got rid of snaps and created this plastic toggle that just, there's friction fits together so that when it's frozen, you can just easily take it apart. And so we're constantly innovating those things to streamline, because every second wasted on the trail is a second we're that much slower on the race. And so innovation is huge in the sport. And then also the biggest thing has been the dog care and the nutrition and what the dogs, I mean, we're figuring out what fuels these dogs. There's lots of veterinarian and studies that have been done over the years on these sled dogs when they're at their peak performances. And so we've really dialed in their nutrition. But every dog is different, and so you're constantly evolving and adjusting. And I'm feeding 26 of my race dogs. Every single one gets a different portion of kibble, different portion of meat, different portion of fat every single day. So I'm going out, that dog needs this amount every day, this dog needs that amount, and I'm constantly evolving and changing. And as the conditions change, I'm having to change and evolve with that. So it's a constant learning curve, and that's something that keeps me involved even more, is that I'm learning something new every day. There's no doubt that I learn something new every single day with these dogs. And to me, that's what keeps me going and keeps me excited about all this. And the more I can evolve and get better, the faster we'll be on the trail.
So before I let you go, obviously tell people kind of what social media you're on, how they can find you. And I think it's important too that people reach out to you if they have questions or other stuff they want to talk about. I think talking to you has been really not only informative but super cool, because I finally got to talk to someone that that does something for a living that I've always admired and loved as a kid. So if they want to reach out to you, what social media can they hit you up with?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook at Wild and Free Mushing. You can just go to Wild and Free Mushing, and they've got a huge following. I post multiple times a day, just dogs. It's all about dogs, and you'll fall in love with my dogs, and you'll want to come back every day and check out who's doing what and who's leading. Instagram is Be Wild Free. Same deal on there. It's all connected, and in my website wildandfreealaska.com. Updates all the time on the team and the plan going forward. And yeah, I mean, one other thing I want to say is that I'm out here alone and I'm doing this, on the ground by myself right now, but I have a huge team. It's just like any sport, any team aspect. I have a huge team all the way down to, to people that don't even associate with me. They're just donating to my kennel. They're sponsoring a dog. We talked briefly about sponsors earlier. I have a lot of gear sponsors, people that support me and help me make this happen. So this is by no means a one-man operation. This is the saying that it takes a village is something that's more relevant to mushing than anything on the planet. We're out there alone with our dogs, but it takes a whole team to get to that finish line and to get to that start line. And so I'm very fortunate that I have them backing me, and that social media, all those followers and fans are also a big part of my career and my life out here.
I love it. Brent, this has been awesome. Thank you for your time. And we look forward to seeing you and your team compete.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate you having me, John. Have to come up and take a visit sometime and take a ride on a dog sled, man.
I will. Thank you, sir. Thank you all for checking out this week's episode. Once again, I'm John. If you liked what you heard and saw today, subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and check out our brand new merch store with hats, coffee mugs, t-shirts, other cool stuff coming down the pipeline. Again, thank you all for support. Be safe and see you next week.